everybody, welcome to Books Alive for grades 3 through 5. My name is Miss Kara and I have a collection of books here that I'm pretty excited to share with you. I've got some nonfiction, I've got some fiction, I've got some picture books, so let's get to it. Up first is a memoir, so that is a person writing about a period of their life. It's called My Wild Life and it is by Susie Esterhaus and she is a wildlife photographer. So in this book, she talks about how she travels the world and going undercover so that the animals don't see her so she can get some really awesome shots. And she talks about working with scientists. You can see over here she's holding a baby polar bear, and then over here she's listening to the heartbeat of a cheetah. And then at the end, there is a Q&A session with Susie, and people ask about what's the hardest part of your job, or how could I become a wildlife photographer? So that's My Wild Life, Adventures of a Wildlife Photographer. Up next is another nonfiction. It's called Perkins, Perfect Purple, and it is by Tammy Lewis Brown and Debbie Lauren Dunn. And this book is set in the 1800s in England. So there's Queen Victoria, and she wants a gown that is purple. And back in the 1800s, purple was a really hard color to find. So it gives you a little bit of the history of making purple. And then it talks about our main character, William Henry Perkins, and he was really into chemistry, and he loved trying to make new things using chemistry. And so then in 1853, a lot of people got sick with malaria, which is a disease that you can get from mosquito bites, and the only cure was from tree bark in Peru. And it was very expensive to get because people had to go into the jungle to get the tree bark. And so Perkins was like, well, what if I can make a synthetic chemical that's just like quinine so that everybody can get healed from malaria. So he's in his lab and he's working really hard, and he discovers that he cannot make a synthetic or chemical-based quinine, but he can make purple. So it was an accidental discovery. And then at the back of the book, there is an author's note with some biographical information and some information about his discoveries and how he changed the world just through this accidental discovery. So that's Perkins, Perfect Purple. And then I'm going to share with you a book called The Missing. It's the true story of my family in World War II. And this is written by Michael Rosen. And you might remember reading another book by Michael Rosen when you were little called Going on a Bear Hunt. So same guy. But this is not like that book. This is a true story, and so this is his family tree, and he grew up in England, and he had some family members that were in America, but his parents and their brothers and sisters were separated during World War II because of the Nazi invasion in their homelands. And they lost track of some family members, and so this is all about how he is piecing together clues to figure out what happened to those family members that they lost. It's a really quick read. It's really interesting. It's like a detective story, and he talks about like what was happening in the world during World War II. All right, so this book is also set in World War II. It's called Maurice and His Dictionary, a true story. And it's by Carrie Fagan. And I like this book because it's interesting, but also it's set up like a graphic novel. So it's got all these panels. So in the beginning, Maurice and his family, they have to leave Belgium because the Nazis have arrived and it's not safe for them to be there. So they leave Belgium and they go to a place in France called Pau. And they're safe in France for a little bit, and then the Nazis arrive in France. And so they have to leave France and go to Portugal. And then when they get to Portugal, they get on this big ship, and it takes them across the Atlantic Ocean to Jamaica. At that time, Jamaica was owned by England, so it was part of the British Empire. And once they get there, then they have to stay in the Gibraltar camp because they are people who don't have a home. They don't have a nation anymore. So they have to stay in the camp until they can find a country that will take them in. And this whole time, Maurice wants more than anything to be a lawyer when he grows up. So he's trying to study, and he's having a hard time finding people studying on his own. So he finds all these people in the camp who used to be teachers. So he finds a history teacher, and he finds a science teacher, and he finds a guy who used to work at a bank to teach him math. And then there's a library at the Gibraltar camp, and he finds a giant dictionary of English words because he's still learning English. And then he realizes that he has to graduate high school so that he can go to college. So he goes to the high school in Jamaica, and he applies there, and he winds up graduating from the high school, and then he has to apply to some universities, and he winds up getting accepted to the University of Toronto. And so at the end of the book, he leaves and he goes to the University of Toronto. But at the very back of the book, there's an author's note with some pictures of Maurice and his family and some of the places that they went. And there's a picture of Maurice all grown up with his kids, and one of those kids is the author of this book. So, book about a dark time with a happy ending. Let's see, what are we going to do next? Now we're going to do The Longest Night of Charlie Noon. This is by Christopher Edge. It is fiction. It is what is known as a historical thriller. So it's set in a past time, and it's a thriller because it's made up stuff and it's very fast paced. I read this whole book in an hour. It was so good, I could not put it down. So we have three characters in here, Charlie, Dizzy, and Johnny. And they all go to school together, and Dizzy loves to go into the forest because he likes to watch birds and draw birds, and he's just kind of obsessed with like nature and the natural world. And he was in the forest one day, and he saw what looked like a note left in sticks on the forest floor, but it was left in code. So he decides that he and Charlie are going to go into the forest, and they're going to see if they can find the note left. And then Johnny is going to follow them, and he wants to like jump out and scare them. And he does, and then they're running through the forest, and Charlie falls down and bonks their head. And so then when Charlie wakes back up, they start looking around, and they realize that like it's really dark out, and it shouldn't be because the sun hasn't gone down yet. And they get lost in the woods, but they're also lost in time. And so they have to figure out how to get out of this time loop that they're stuck in, and they have to figure out how to get out of the woods and back home. So it's a very fast pace, a lot of crazy stuff happens, but I think you'll really like it. The Longest Night of Charlie Noon. I have another nonfiction because November is aviation month. This book is called Jumbo, and it is about the making of the Boeing 747. How great is that title page? The greatest. So here we go. It's September 30, 1968. Out rolls the Boeing 747. It's amazing. It's astounding. It can't fly yet because they haven't figured out how to make something that big fly through the air. This book talks about all of the history of aviation, and then all of the things that they need to figure out, the engineers need to figure out in order to make this plane fly. So it talks about lift, and it talks about thrust and drag, and it's got these really cool like diagrams and cross sections. And then, where's that next page? And then you get to like peek into the cockpit and look at all these like knobs and dials. And then of course at the end, we all know this, right? At the end, they're able to make it fly. But this was really interesting because I didn't realize how making a really big jet was so different from making smaller jets. All right, we got two left. We'll do this one. This is Curiosity. It's a nonfiction. It's the story of a Mars rover, and this one is on the Blue Stem list this year. We have lots of copies of this at the library, both the hardcover and we have digital ebooks. So, oh, there's Mars. So this book obviously talks about Curiosity, which is the name of the rover, but it also talks about like the history of space exploration, and it talks about how they built Curiosity and they had to use a super clean room where they wore these funny suits and then they had to walk through like a wall of air because they didn't want to accidentally send human dust to space, because that way if Curiosity found it, they'd be like, oh no, there's life on Mars, but it was just something that they had left on the rover, and that's not what you want. That's bad science. And then it talks about how it was built in California and they had to put it on an airplane and then fly it to Florida so that they could send it into space. So there's the rocket where they send it into space. And then it lifts off and that falls off and that opens up and then this little part goes all the way to Mars. And then when it gets to Mars, that capsule opens up. There's a parachute. And then there's these little cables that lower the rover to the ground. And then of course once we're there, the rover itself is set up with all of these really cool tools so that it can do some science while it's up there. So it takes dirt samples and dust samples and it uses a laser to like melt rocks so they can figure out what the rocks are made out of. So I like this book. I like the big format of this book. And I definitely learned some stuff that I did not know about the Curiosity rover. That one is a quick read. And then our last book is a graphic novel. It's called Lightfall. And it's book 1 of a series. So the second book hasn't come out yet. But this is The Girl and the Galdorian. And I love this book. I cannot wait for the second one. So... dun, da, da, beautiful artwork, interesting characters. So our main character is Beatrice, and she was adopted by a pig wizard, and he makes potions for people, and Beatrice goes out into the forest to collect supplies for those potions. And one day Beatrice is out in the forest and she has to climb up this giant tree and she gets stuck. But look at that view. She gets stuck. And then on the way down, she meets this guy here who's a Galdorian, and he is looking for the pig wizard. So they go back to the pig wizard's house and the pig wizard is gone. He's gone on a quest. So the girl and the Galdorian are going to go on a quest to find the pig wizard and figure out where he's gone. And they go through valleys filled with giant crabs, and they go to cities where all kinds of adventurers are, and they go into the lair of the light protectors, and they have to fight those guys. And it's high adventure, high action, very exciting. If you like the Amulet series, you are really gonna like this book. So that is all that I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back next month with a new selection of books, and have a great day, guys. Bye.